Do you often feel anxious at work? Maybe you have this nervousness inside that is exhausting and is doing more harm than good. Maybe you find yourself on Sunday night so anxious that you are dreading Mondays. Most resources out there speak about how to cope with anxiety, but not actually how to make it go away or reduce it. Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a girl called Mandy. Mandy is an expat who moved to the UK to study and find better career prospects than in her home country. Her dream is to work in London in a digital-driven company and be successful. After uni, she finds a digital marketing job in London. Mandy is not an English native speaker and she doesn't have much experience in the digital industry as this is her first job. Mandy starts her first day in the new position and joins the first team meeting. There are colleagues talking about numbers, profits, and metrics she's never heard of. She feels completely lost. Her breath starts to shorten and her heart beats really fast. She panics because she feels so out of place that she's thinking, when is everyone finding out that she's not that great and they shouldn't have hired her? Eventually, the meeting ends and so does her anxiety. But the more the day passes, the more Mandy feels anxious about meetings and conversations, so she started really dreading going into work. One day at a meeting, she feels so nervous that she makes up an excuse to leave the room, and this makes her escape temporarily from her anxiety. She feels defeated and disappointed in herself. She works so hard to build up the skills to get this job, and now she cannot even stand to be in the meetings with her colleagues. She thinks, this can't be it. There must be another way to feel comfortable in that environment and succeed. She can't give all of her efforts up. She wants to stop being stuck in this situation. She needs to change something. She decides to open up about her anxiety to her partner for the very first time. Mandy explains him what she's going through and how she feels going into work every single day. Surprisingly, her partner takes her seriously, asks questions to better understand the situation and dive deeper, and finally he shares his own experience. This makes Mandy feel heard and less lonely. She begins to realize that this first step is putting things into perspective, and it's eye-opening to see the problem from another angle. Together with her partner, they realize that researching anxiety could be helpful to really understand the problem better. Mandy looked into it and found out that anxiety happens when there is an overestimation of a situation and an underestimation of your own coping skills to deal with that situation. Then Mandy realizes that to make her anxiety go away, she needs to reduce the overestimation of that situation and increase the underestimation of her own coping skills. So she researches and eventually in her day-to-day she implements changes. A few years later, Mandy's anxiety has reduced drastically. It's still there at times, but instead of being a blocker, this time is her driving force. She uses that new approach of problems like anxiety as her superpower that makes her be better in every aspect of her life. And those few times that anxiety feel like it's starting to become a blocker again, Mandy now has her own personal toolkit to fix it right away. As a result, she now feels comfortable at work. And because of that, she unlocks her full career potential and eventually gets hired to run the digital marketing of the top app in the world. Mandy is happy and fulfilled now. Maybe you guessed it, Mandy's story is actually mine. My aim today is to dive deep into the 4 steps I took to make my anxiety in professional situations go away. For the most parts, at least. Hi everyone, my name is Martina. A few years ago, I felt stuck in the place I was living with my job prospects, in my relationships. I felt behind, but I wanted to change my life. Then I started improving the most important relationship I'll ever have, the one with myself. This brought me to have a successful career in a top tech company, develop habits that keeps me healthy, feeling much better with my body, and developing strong personal relationships. All in less than 4 years. While going through this journey, I couldn't easily find helpful content around. So I'm here because I want to share practical and relatable learnings I discovered, hoping this will help you. Okay, back to anxiety in the workplace. To start taking steps towards the most comfortable you, it's so important to understand what anxiety actually is. Anxiety comes from two key elements: the overestimation of the situation combined with an underestimation of how well you'll cope with it. For example, you have to give an update in your next team meeting, and you're anxious because you're imagining that people will think they are losing their time listening to you. Overestimation of your situation. And you will be nervous that you will provide a poor quality update. Underestimation of your coping skills. In reality, some people will be interested to hearing your update because it's only 5 minutes and you've prepared before. So what you'll say will be relevant to them. In this video, we'll tackle both of these anxiety elements with a 4-step approach, starting with the overestimation of the situation. In order to reduce this first factor, you need to bring reality into the mix. Because when you have anxiety, you're usually in your own head and disconnect from the real world for a bit. So how do you get back to it? The first way I found super useful, almost liberating, is talking about it. When you have anxiety, usually you have a lot of thoughts in your head. However, you only have your own head to get questions and answers from. But when you start to talk about your thoughts with someone else other than you, your brain starts to get some reality checks. For example, you might be thinking you'll be nervous about the presentation you're gonna have. And your head starts spinning, thinking you shouldn't be nervous. Other people are not nervous. It must be because you're bad. You're not so used to it, and so on. Then you open up about that anxiety with a colleague that needs to present with you, and find out that he is also nervous about it. This already makes your unhelpful thoughts be put into perspective, and you should get more out of your own head. Personally, my anxiety started reducing a lot when I opened up about it to my partner. He made me feel heard, and instead of giving me a quick solution for it, he asked questions to understand more. This made me feel like I wasn't alone. I had someone to express these feelings to, so my head was not overloaded with negative thoughts. Also, by getting deeper in what I was feeling, he made my head get back into reality, and my thoughts became less catastrophic. So next time you're anxious at work, find someone to express that to. And if you're shy or not so comfortable with deep conversations, even making a small joke about it, like, "Oh man, I'm so nervous about this presentation, haha," can help making colleagues open up about how they feel as well. But I understand that sometimes you might find yourself alone and without the possibility to speak with someone. For example, when you're anxious and you cannot fall asleep until very late at night. Apart from journaling that can be super useful, and I'll probably make a video about that, a great way that reduces anxiety in these situations that really work well for me has been breaking down the problem. Usually by writing it down on a paper or a device. If you are like me, you might think, yes, great, but where do I start with the writing? No worries, I got you covered. I use this really great framework that walks you through it. And in the end, you should feel much less anxious. Let's see it and feel it together. Alright, as you can see, there is this template which helps you to break down the problem in different areas and different steps. So let's start filling it up together. Starting from the first one, situation. What led to the unpleasant emotion? What distressing physical sensation did you have? So for example, I could write presenting in the team update. The physical distress was short breath, heart beating faster, automatic thoughts. What thoughts or images went through your mind? I don't know what to say. People will judge me and think they're losing their time. How much did you believe the thought at the time? For example, 90%. Emotions. What emotions did you feel at the time? I felt scared, nervous, anxious. How intense was the emotion? 90%, so quite intense. Adaptive response. Which thinking style did you engage in? To fill up this part, you will have to use another template with all the unhelpful thinking styles. Here you will find an overview of all these thinking styles that are unhelpful to you. So you can read the description and then choose which one you think was the unhelpful thinking style you were engaging in. Once you've decided, for example, in this case, jump into conclusion, you can go back to your template for the automatic thoughts record and write down in the adaptive response, jump to conclusions. And then it says, use questions below to respond to the automatic thoughts. So you will go down where you see questions to compose an adaptive response and start answering these questions as well. What is the evidence that the automatic thought is true? For example, here, true, I haven't prepared 100%. Not true, so not true. People didn't seem judgy or to be judging me in meetings. Is there an alternative explanation? So I wrote here, alternative. People won't care that much and I will be quite prepared. 3. What's the worst that could happen? For example, in this case, they think I'm losing their time and they will judge me. Then you go back down. What's the best that could happen? You go back up. You write best. For example, they think my update is amazing. Then you go back down again. What's the most realistic outcome? So here you go back to reality. Go back here in the adaptive response side and write realistic. For example, in my case, they are okay with my update actually. That could be a realistic outcome. Then you go back here, point number 4. If a friend were in this situation and had this thought, what would I tell him, her? You go back to the adaptive response and you write friend. And now you just pretend to be talking to your friend about this. And it's not you in this situation. What I would say is, for example, to not be so hard on myself. If you prepare, you can definitely give a good update. Then you go back again to the last question of the adaptive response. How much do you believe each response from 0 to 100? And so now you have to rate all of these responses you've given here. So I go back and rate from the first one. First one, I haven't prepared. I believe this 90%, for example. So I kind of believe it a lot. Then the second one, I believe it 30%, that people will seem not to judge. The third one, people won't care that much and I will be quite prepared, which is the alternative. I believe it's 70% because it's a bit of an in-between between the true and false. The next one, worst thing that can happen, think that they are losing their time and judge me. I believe this 40%. So I believe it, but not as strongly. What's the best thing that could happen? So here I rated my answer 30%, so I don't believe it that much, that I think that my date will be amazing, but there is a slight chance. Next one, the realistic outcome. I believe it's 70% because it's a bit in the middle and it kind of makes sense for my brain at least. What you would say if you would be a friend, I believe this answer 80%. Finally, I go to the outcome section and here I need to answer how much do you now believe your automatic thought from 0 to 100. In my case, now that I've done this exercise, I believe it's 60%. So it got reduced from 90. What emotions do you feel now? At what intensity? I feel less anxious and scared and I have a bit more control. Usually when I finish filling up all of this template, I feel less my automatic thought. So the percentage usually decrease. And yeah, overall my feelings are reduced, so they are not as strong as before. And for example, if I cannot fall asleep, in this case, then I will be able to after that. This framework has been great for me when work, personal problems, and to-dos are preventing me from falling asleep at night. Usually after filling it, I can finally go back to bed and have a good night's sleep. So I highly recommend it, especially if you're in this situation. Okay. So the 2 techniques we've talked about tackle the overestimation of the situation. Now let's see how I've managed to take care of the underestimation of my own coping skills and how you can do that too. To do so, my very first advice is face your fears. What is it that really scares you? Are you scared of failing? Of not being good enough? Or of disappointing others? It's really important to identify what your fears are so that you can make a conscious deal with yourself to eventually conquer them. A little bit at a time. Start with small, everyday work challenges. For example, standing up and going to ask a question to a colleague, or going to that meeting in person rather than virtually. Whatever situation that feel like challenging but not overwhelming. I've done that myself. When I started working, I found a job in digital marketing in London. My English wasn't great, so I was in the first meeting, sitting down, not understanding what they were talking about, both from a language and subject perspective. So inside of me, I was panicking. I kept telling myself, why am I here? I'm not supposed to be here. I'm a fraud. Then I soon realized I don't know much English and that I was the wrong hire. I felt like a proper imposter, which is one of the situations where I got the most anxiety from. By the way, if you've ever felt this way, I've made a whole video about imposter syndrome and how I overcome it. I'll put the link down in the description. Back to us. My small challenge at the beginning was to pass the exams that they assigned to me at work. It took me obviously more than the time that the native employee will take to pass that exam. Because of the language, but also because my anxiety was blocking me. But instead of punishing myself for being slow, I tried to take my time and eventually passed all the exams. From there, I took this approach of facing one little challenge or fear at a time. Slowly, this built up my confidence, and my brain rewired to face bigger challenges. So I challenge you to do the same. Take it one at a time and celebrate the little wins you have. You're going to be soon on your path to an anxiety-free success. So we've talked about what situations are in your control, where you can decide to take proactive steps to reduce your anxiety over time. But what should you do when you are in an uncomfortable situation you didn't put yourself voluntarily into? Don't run away. When I worked at TikTok, I got asked to prepare a million budget proposal within a day. I felt a lot of pressure at the time, and my brain was telling me, run away! I just wanted to escape the situation as fast as possible. I was already planning my excuse like, maybe I could pretend I'm sick. But then I read about anxiety more in depth and found out that this is a natural response our mind gives us in fearful situations. The brain wants us to go away from the situation to gain short-term relief. But this only feeds our anxiety in the long run. So what I did was to take all the time until the deadline to prepare, which made me relax a bit. But what really helped me was being more compassionate with myself. I thought, okay, I have this short deadline, so it's unrealistic to expect a very detailed budget proposal with such a short notice. The best I can do is to deliver on a proposal, but without going into the detail. Also, I feel like I need to set expectations for tomorrow when I will present, so people will not be disappointed by my outcome. So I communicated with my manager what was the realistic outcome. He obviously understood and was okay with it. Moral of the story, my anxiety reduced massively. Because instead of running away, I faced my fears and stay in that situation, but at my own terms. At times, you will be presented with situations that makes you anxious, like being called to speak up in a meeting, or having to prepare an important case study with a short deadline. In these occasions, your brain would rather escape and get that short-term relief. But to become a less anxious person, you need to train your brain to be in these situations and shift the cards to your advantage as much as possible. Slowly, also, this mechanism will show your brain that you can do it. And so, it will increase the underestimation of your coping mechanisms. To conclude, for reducing and even making anxiety completely go away, you need to decrease the overestimation of the situation and increase the underestimation of your coping skills. And to do that effectively, you need to talk about it, break down the problem, face your fears, don't run away. Well, those are my must-do steps to stop feeling anxious at work. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this video. Are there any specific topics that you'd like me to cover in more details? Or do you have any tips you would like to share based on your experience? And the most important action of all that I'd advise you to take right now is to use this video as your personal tool to talk about anxiety by sharing it with someone and spark a conversation on this. What about those best friends that have always been there for you? Could they also use your help right now by watching this video? Helping someone else often is the deepest way to help yourself.